If you find yourself waking up 2, 3, or even 4 times every single night just to make a trip to the bathroom, I want you to pause for a second before you do anything else. What I'm about to share with you today has the potential to completely transform the way you perceive this frustrating problem. I realize that sounds like a very bold claim, but please stay with me for just a few moments. Most people naturally assume that if they are getting up that often, something must be wrong with their bladder. Men often point the finger at their prostate, while others simply assume they are drinking too much water before bed, so they start cutting back on their fluids. They might try specific bladder exercises or even start taking medications, yet they still find themselves awake 3 or 4 times a night, week after week. But what if your bladder isn't the real culprit? What if the actual cause is something occurring hours before you even close your eyes? What if it is something buried deep within your metabolism, a process your body carries out quietly every evening without you even noticing? For many individuals, that is precisely what is happening. The thing pulling you out of bed isn't necessarily a weak bladder or an enlarged prostate, though those can certainly be factors. Instead, what is quietly driving this issue for so many is a hormonal signal, a metabolic shift linked to a specific hormone called insulin. This is the part of the story that changes everything. When your insulin levels remain high into the evening hours, it interferes with the natural chemical messages that normally tell your kidneys to hold on to fluid during the night. Instead of your body conserving that liquid until the morning, your kidneys keep filtering it out, which means your bladder fills up once, then twice, and then again, right in the middle of your most important sleep cycles. This is not strictly a bladder problem, it is a hormonal environment problem. Once you grasp this mechanism, the solution becomes surprisingly clear and straightforward. You don't need extreme protocols or complex medical treatments. You just need to understand how your body actually functions and make a few small, precise adjustments to your evening habits. That is exactly what we are going to explore today. I am Dr. Samuel Thompson. Over the past 20 years of clinical and surgical practice, I have treated hundreds of patients struggling with nighttime urination. Some were waking up 3 times a night, others 4. I even had one patient who was getting up nearly 10 times in a single night. I want you to really think about what that does to a person over time. It isn't just about feeling exhausted the next morning, it is about the massive, cumulative impact of having fragmented, broken sleep for months or even years. Sleep is much more than just a period of rest. When your sleep is disrupted night after night, your ability to regulate blood sugar begins to fail. Your cortisol levels shift in ways that make managing daily stress much harder. Your appetite hormones get thrown out of balance, which leads to intense cravings the following day. Your immune system cannot repair itself the way it should, and your cardiovascular system never gets the recovery period it needs. Therefore, nighttime urination, when left unaddressed, can quietly evolve into a much larger health issue than most people realize. The most frustrating part is that so many people spend years chasing the wrong symptoms, focusing on the bladder when the source of the trouble is somewhere else entirely. Before we go any further, if you are interested in protecting your sleep, your metabolism, and your long-term health as you age, I have put together a comprehensive longevity guide. This guide outlines the daily habits that support better sleep, stable blood sugar, and healthier hormone levels. Sleep is one of the most vital foundations of a long life, yet most people unknowingly sabotage it every single night. You can find the link to that guide in the description below. Now let's get into the actual mechanism of what is happening inside your body. Every time you consume food, your body releases insulin. That is its primary job. Insulin is the hormone responsible for moving glucose, which is essentially sugar, out of your bloodstream and into your cells, so it can be used for energy. When you eat a meal, especially one rich in carbohydrates or sugar, your blood glucose rises, and your body responds by secreting insulin to bring those levels back down. This is a normal, healthy process. For someone with good insulin sensitivity, this happens efficiently. Glucose goes up, insulin clears it, and levels return to baseline within a reasonable amount of time. However, insulin does not only manage blood sugar, it has various other effects throughout the body, and one of the most significant involves your kidneys. Here is the part most people never hear. Insulin plays a massive role in how the kidneys manage sodium and fluid balance. When insulin levels stay elevated for long periods, especially in people who have developed some degree of insulin resistance, it disrupts the hormonal signals that normally tell the kidneys to retain fluid overnight. Your body has a natural 24-hour cycle. During the night, it is designed to reduce urine production significantly. There are specific hormonal signals that essentially tell the kidneys to slow down, to hold onto fluid, and to conserve. This is why a healthy person can typically sleep 7 or 8 hours without needing to visit the bathroom. But when insulin stays high into the evening, those signals are drowned out. The kidneys don't get the message to reduce their output. Instead, they keep filtering at a high rate, and your bladder keeps filling up. The problem isn't that your bladder is malfunctioning. The problem is upstream in the metabolic and hormonal environment your body is sitting in when you try to rest. This is especially pronounced in people with diabetes, prediabetes, or general insulin resistance. When blood sugar is chronically high, the kidneys are under constant pressure to work. Glucose that cannot be managed properly starts showing up in the urine, and the kidneys, in their effort to dilute this sugar, produce a much higher volume of urine. This is actually one of the earliest warning signs of uncontrolled blood sugar. Frequent urination, particularly at night, is often the first thing patients notice before they even know their sugar levels are out of range. But here is the critical point. You do not have to have a diagnosis of diabetes to experience this. You don't even have to be pre-diabetic in a formal clinical sense. If your insulin levels are consistently spiking in the evening and not coming down efficiently, your kidneys are receiving the wrong signals, and your sleep is paying the price. This is the hidden layer that most conversations about nighttime urination completely miss. Now, I want to discuss something that surprises almost all of my patients when I explain it. When people think about their diet and their insulin, they usually focus only on dinner. They think about how heavy the meal was, whether they ate pasta, or if they had dessert. But dinner is often not the primary driver of this issue. The biggest culprit is actually evening snacking. Think about your typical night. You finish dinner around 6:30 or 7 p.m. Then, a couple of hours later, you are sitting on the couch watching television and you reach for something to eat. A handful of crackers, a small bowl of cereal, some fruit, or something sweet. Every single one of those eating moments triggers a fresh insulin response. Even small amounts of food cause insulin to rise. If you are eating at 8 p.m. and again at 9 p.m. and your show ends at 10:30 p.m. so you have a little nightcap snack, you are heading to bed with insulin levels that are still actively elevated. That is the exact window where the damage to your sleep occurs. Because those insulin levels are high, your kidneys are receiving the wrong message. They are not shifting into the nighttime conservation mode your body desperately needs. They are still in active processing mode, and that results in more urine production throughout the night. We must also consider the quality of those snacks. Not all evening food is equal. Carbohydrates are the most powerful drivers of insulin release, and sugar is even more potent. When you eat something high in carbohydrates in the evening, the insulin spike is larger and it takes much longer to return to a baseline level. Think about the types of foods that usually appear during evening snacking: chips, crackers, bread, cereal, cookies, ice cream, or sweetened drinks. These are all high-carb foods that produce substantial insulin responses. That response, happening so late in the day, bleeds directly into the hours when your body is trying to wind down for sleep. The combination of eating late and eating high-carb foods is essentially a perfect formula for disrupted sleep through elevated insulin and increased nighttime urine production. Many people who struggle with this have been told to just drink less water before bed. While the timing of your fluids does matter, simply cutting out water doesn't solve the underlying issue. The problem isn't primarily about the amount of fluid you are putting in, it is about how your body handles that fluid once it is inside you. That is a hormonal question, not just a volume question. When insulin is properly stabilized in the evening, your body becomes much more efficient at holding on to fluid during the night. The kidneys get the correct signal to slow down, the bladder doesn't fill as fast, and your sleep becomes consolidated and deep. That is the shift we are aiming for. There is another piece of this puzzle that is often overlooked: the connection between sleep disruption and metabolic health. Once this cycle starts, it feeds itself. When your sleep is fragmented, your body produces more cortisol. your stress hormone. Cortisol directly influences blood sugar by raising it, which then drives more insulin release, which further disrupts kidney function and leads to even more nighttime urination. The very problem you are trying to solve is made worse by the sleep loss it causes. Beyond cortisol, broken sleep affects two critical appetite hormones, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin, which signals hunger, goes up when you don't sleep well. Leptin, which signals fullness, goes down. This means that after a rough night, you are naturally hungrier the next day. You have stronger cravings, especially for those high-carb, sugary foods that started the problem in the first place. This makes it harder to make disciplined choices in the evening, leading to another night of the same issue. This is why addressing the problem early is so important. The longer the cycle continues, the more entrenched it becomes. Now, let's talk practically about what you can actually do to change this. The first and most impactful adjustment is to establish a clear eating window. Specifically, you should finish your last meal at least 3 to 4 hours before you plan to go to sleep. If you go to bed at 10 p.m., that means you should be done eating by 6 or 6:30 p.m. at the latest. This gives your body enough time to process the insulin response from your dinner before you try to sleep. By the time you lie down, your insulin levels have had a chance to fall back toward baseline, and your kidneys can finally shift into their appropriate nighttime mode. This single change alone has made a massive difference for many of the patients I have worked with. The second change involves the composition of your last meal. If you're going to eat in the evening, try to keep the carbohydrate content lower. This helps reduce the size and the duration of the insulin spike. Meals that are centered around proteins, healthy fats, and non-starchy vegetables produce a much more moderate insulin response than meals heavy in bread, pasta, rice, or sweets. This doesn't mean you can never eat carbs for dinner, but it means being conscious of the quantity and recognizing that a large carb-heavy meal will produce insulin activity that lasts well into the night. The third change is often the hardest because it is such a normalized part of our culture: eliminating late-night snacking. Not just reducing it, but genuinely stopping the habit of eating after your dinner window has closed. As I mentioned, every single eating episode triggers insulin. Evening snacking essentially restarts the insulin cycle at the exact time your body is trying to wind it down. Cutting out this habit is one of the most direct ways to allow your insulin to fall to healthy overnight levels. The fourth practical step is the timing of your fluids. This is not about drinking less water overall. Hydration is crucial, and you should not restrict your total daily intake. However, you should try to concentrate your fluid intake in the earlier part of the day and taper off in the 2 to 3 hours before bed. This reduces the total volume of fluid your kidneys need to process while you are sleeping. This works in perfect harmony with the insulin management piece. When your insulin is stable and your fluid timing is correct, the conditions for sleeping through the entire night become much more achievable. For some people, these changes produce noticeable results within just a few days. The body is highly responsive, and when the hormonal environment shifts, the kidneys react relatively quickly. For others, especially those with a longer history of insulin issues, it may take a few weeks of consistent habits before the full effect is felt. From my clinical experience, I can tell you that when these changes are made consistently, they produce meaningful results for the vast majority of people whose nighttime urination is driven by this metabolic mechanism. I want to address something directly because I know some of you are thinking about other potential causes. Prostate issues in men can absolutely contribute to this problem, and if you have symptoms that suggest a prostate concern, you should definitely be evaluated by a doctor. Overactive bladder is also a real condition that sometimes requires medical treatment. Additionally, certain medications like diuretics can increase urine production at night, and that is something to discuss with the professional who prescribed them. However, here is my key clinical observation. Very often, patients are treated for bladder or prostate issues, while the metabolic piece is never even mentioned. In many cases, when the metabolic side is addressed, the nighttime urination improves dramatically, even in people who have some degree of bladder or prostate involvement. So the question is not whether metabolic factors are the only cause, but whether they are being addressed at all. For a huge number of people, They are not, and that is a gap in care that leads to years of unnecessary exhaustion. Let me briefly touch on the bigger picture of what improving your sleep does for you in the long run. Consolidated, high-quality sleep is one of the most powerful tools for your long-term health. Sleep is when your brain clears out metabolic waste products that build up during the day, a process linked to long-term cognitive health. It is when your cardiovascular system gets its primary recovery window, when your blood pressure drops and your heart gets a much-needed rest. Sleep is when your immune system performs its most active repair work and when growth hormone is released, which is essential for tissue repair and metabolic health. When you restore your sleep by fixing nighttime urination, you aren't just solving a minor inconvenience. You are restoring one of your body's most fundamental repair processes. The downstream effects on your energy, mood, focus, and longevity are very real. This is why I take nighttime urination so seriously. It isn't just about the bathroom trips. It's about what the chronic lack of sleep does to every other system in your body over time. If you have been dealing with this for years, I want you to hear this clearly. You do not have to accept this as a normal part of getting older. For most people, this is a fixable problem. The mechanism is understood, the tools are accessible, and the changes required are not extreme. Finish eating earlier, keep your dinner lower in carbs, stop the snacking habit, time your fluids toward the morning and afternoon. Give your body that 3 to 4 hour gap before bed. Let your insulin fall. Let your kidneys receive the right signals. Allow your body to do what it was designed to do. I want you to try just one change tonight. Finish dinner a little earlier and skip that late night snack. Let your body run its natural overnight cycle without interference. You might be surprised at how quickly your system responds when you stop working against it. If you found this explanation helpful and want a more detailed guide on the habits that support better sleep and metabolic health, please check out the longevity guide I've linked below. Sleep is the foundation of your health, and you deserve to get a full night of it. Subscribe for more practical, science-based advice, and take care of your sleep. It is the best investment you can make in your future. I'll see you in the next video.